is Krista Gibson with Keeping It Real and NewSpiritJournal.com. I have a fantastic guest for you today, Robert Simmons. And those of you now who work with crystals or have played with crystals at all will, I'm sure, recognize this book, Book of Stones. And I like to say you should sell your books by the pound. They're quite extensive. And this book has just everything you want to know about rocks and stones, and it's a directory of all different stones and how to work with them. And Robert is the person who brought Moldavite, as far as I'm concerned, in the mid-'80s, early 90s, mid-'80s, to the forefront. For those of us who work with it, and we can talk about that as well. But one of the reasons that we're talking with Robert today is he has a new book out, and it's called The Alchemy of Stones, Co-Creating with Crystals, Minerals, and Gemstones for Healing and Transformation. So welcome, Robert. So glad to have you here.
Hi, Krista. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So there's so much more I could say about you, but I just hate things where the interviewer just talks about you and you sit there waiting. So we're just going to jump in. And
All right.
The first things I want to ask you is kind of, I was really surprised to see this book when I got it in for review. So what prompted you to write it, and kind of talk to us a little bit about it?
Certainly. It's been my whole 35 years of working with stones and their energies that really led up to writing this book. And I spent 5 years doing it. What I've always been wanting to understand better is a deeper recognition of what is going on between people and stones. You know, people who like crystals, and most of us can feel some energy from them or have some kind of experience that lets us know that what we call stone energy is happening between us and a stone that we're holding, for example. But you know, what is that, and what kind of is it just something that's being radiated like light from a light bulb, or is it something deeper? And my own opinion, after all these years, my own belief and experience, is that it is actually communication. I view the stones as beings, and I feel that what's going on that we call the energy is the exchange of consciousness between ourselves and the stones. And one of the reasons I said co-creation on my book, you know, put that in the title, is that I think that everything we do with stones is a co-creation with them. And even the feeling of energy is something that we participate in. You know, it takes a person and a stone for crystal energy to happen, just like it takes an observer for a rainbow to be observed, to exist. But we can go from there. That's a bit of why I wrote the book. And I did discover in my studies of alchemy that what people are doing intuitively with crystals is very much the same as the aim and purpose of the ancient alchemists. And I think that following that path of alchemy is a way we can really take our work with crystals much, much deeper and much further.
Right. I agree. And the book is, I reviewed it in a past issue of NewSpiritJournal.com. And, you know, I kind of would feel like you couldn't do much more after the Book of Stones, but you really did. And I think we both recognize, because I've also been working with stones for well over 30 years, that there's an evolution, there's a progression that's happening with the stones and the way that they're relating and working with all of us. And so when I saw you were using the word alchemy, I thought how perfect that was. Now in the book, you talk about working specifically, one of the stones that came up in there a lot was Rosofia, which is a stone I have, but I hadn't done much with. And of course, now I pulled it out and I'm working with it a lot. Can you talk more about some of the specific things that you talk about in the book with specific stones?
Certainly. If you see the book cover over my shoulder there, you'll see that there are 4 stones on the image of the cover. And the bottom one, that's a kind of a salmon red color, is the one I call Rosofia. This is a piece of it, that humbled piece that I work with myself in meditation. And the way I discovered Rosofia was quite an amazing thing. I was going to speak at a conference called the Sophia Conference. And Sophia is the ancient name in Greek for wisdom, and it also refers to what's called the soul of the world. So Sophia, to the ancient Greeks and to the alchemists who also use that name, referred to the living conscious presence of the soul of the world. And the alchemists always believed that if their work was to succeed, they would have to co-create with the soul of the world. Well, when I went to speak at this conference, lo and behold, synchronistically, on the mantle of the room they were putting us up in, there was a piece of this stone. And I'd never seen it before, but being the stone junkie that I am, first thing I did was put it up to my heart, breathe a little bit, and tune into it. And the stone emanated these beautiful, what I would call curving energy currents that focused and circulated all around my heart. And they brought about a feeling of emotional comfort, sweetness, connection with the earth. It's a very grounded and grounding stone. Yet at the same time, it's as though you feel the love of the earth reaching up through you into your heart. And so I found that stone at the Sophia conference. It seemed to me to carry the energies of Sophia. So I dubbed it Rosofia, the rose of Sophia, or the heart of the soul of the world. And many, many people have very similar responses to it, to what I described.
So yeah, and you talk about in the book about creating with Sophia. And so I'm real curious, like when you write your books and do these different things, do you, I mean, I know the answer, but I want you to talk about it in terms of involving the stones in what you do and involving the stones in your creative process, because there's so many people right now who really are trying to be creative with everything going on, you know, trying to recreate their lives, a lot of people. So can you talk a bit about co-creating with the stones? How do you do that when you do something like your jewelry or a book?
Well, when I write a book or when I write an article about a particular stone, I do really simple meditation with it, which I also teach in my workshops. And it's just, it goes like this, you know, I take the stone, I bring it to my heart. And on the inhalation, I invite the stone into my heart, and I imagine its image moving into my heart, as well as attending to whatever I feel. As I exhale, I offer myself out in relationship to the stone being, to the spiritual being that is the consciousness related to a particular stone, to Rosofia in this case. And I do that with a number of breaths and circulate until I can really feel the connection and I can see the stone's image inside me. At that point, when I'm getting ready to write about a stone, I say inwardly, I ask the question inwardly, what is your nature and what can we do together? And that's how I write all my books in terms of the information that comes about the spiritual qualities of the stones. Mm-hmm. When you connect with them as a being, there's a give and take. And the thing that usually happens first when I'm tuning in that way is I'll see an image that is a symbol of something about the stone's qualities. And as I look at that, there's an immediate sort of translation in my mind as to what that symbol is about. And then there will be more things that come. And oftentimes once the sort of symbolic meaning has come, there's a flow of words as if the stone is actually speaking. So there's a co-creation right there in terms of bringing through information that people can use to introduce themselves to particular stones. And it really is both of us working together. You know, all the language is inside my head. I don't think stones really have language, but their energies are something that our minds can translate into language when we tune into them. So that's one piece of co-creation, and we can go much further than that.
Because I can kind of see also, you know, somebody that, let's say, is trying to recreate themselves career-wise. They could take a stone, whether it was Rosofia or clear quartz or whatever, what might resonate for them, and do what you're talking about with the stone, and then spend time a couple of times a day with that stone. as they're working on whatever the project is, and use that as a co-creation process. I mean, is that something you would also say could be a good thing to do?
Oh, yeah, I mean, in a way, that's the very core of the things that I've written, like the Book of Stones, where you view the stones as your spiritual allies. And if you have a purpose in mind that you're attempting in terms of something you want to create in your life, or recreate your life, as you say, you choose your allies. You let yourself be drawn to them, or you look in the book until something resonates. There's a lot of ways to sort of figure out which ones are the natural allies for the purpose you're holding. If it was career, for example, and so a person wanted to transform it, my first thought would be to recommend Moldavite. And my very first Moldavite that I ever had. Wow. I still have it, and we've been through much together.
I'll bet.
And Moldavite is, the essence of Moldavite is an acceleration of your highest purpose and your evolution. So I've got lots and lots of letters from people who said, when I got my Moldavite, suddenly my job changed. I didn't expect it, or suddenly an opportunity that I did want came to me. But it's not only careers and jobs with Moldavite, it's also relationships. It's also experiences of maybe discovering your spiritual purpose or what inspires you. It can be whatever is needed for the acceleration of your evolutionary path, the purpose you came in with. And that's really something that is very specific to Moldavite, that particular quality. And the word acceleration is key. That's so many people say. They say, whoa, yes. I went into purpose speed when Moldavite came into my life.
Right. Yeah, I tell people, when you start working with Moldavite, take it easy. You know, I don't know, I personally don't know anybody who hasn't had an immediate experience with Moldavite, whether it's, you know, feeling hyped up or heat or buzzing or a little dizziness, whatever. I mean, it's a very powerful stone. And I don't say that in a scary way. And you know I don't, but just in a way of, it's a very powerful stone and can be a wonderful ally, definitely.
And that's, you know, that's one of the reasons. If, again, on my book cover, Moldavite is one of the four cornerstones of the alchemy of stones. And through the book, people will see that those four stones, Moldavite, Rosofia, azeztulite, and phenakite, are all woven in through the story. Now, I have the dictionary in the back of the book has pictures and the essential qualities of 375 stones, roughly, in addition to the whole sort of inner tutorial that the book offers. But those four stones are on the cover because they have a synergy with one another, and they're the four I work with the most myself. So Moldavite's definitely one. And maybe I could tell you about the other two just briefly.
Sure, that would be great. Yes, yes, that would be great.
The stone on top of the four stones in the diagram there, it's kind of a mandala on my book cover. The top one is azeztulite, and this is a piece of the azeztulite that came from Vermont. The first white azeztulites were found in North Carolina and Vermont, and they came after it was sort of prophesied to me that they would come, not through me, but my co-author of the Book of Stones, Naisha Azian, tuned in and connected to the beings of this stone who called themselves the Azez, and said that they carry the frequency of the great central sun, and that their purpose is to bring Earth to its next level of spiritual awakening. So you talk about the way that things are in a sort of chaotic breakdown mode in many ways in the world right now. Part of what we know in spiritual alchemy, it's also in the book, is that times of breakdown, times of high tension, times in which the opposites become extremely polarized, presage moments of transcendence. And one of the things that I go into a lot is how to evoke what Carl Jung called the transcendent function, going to a higher level through holding the opposites and then getting to a higher state in which they aren't in conflict anymore. So azeztulite has this energy of the light of heaven coming down. Rosofia, which is its natural partner, is like the love of earth coming up. So when I hold them together over my heart, you get this feeling of the love of the earth coming up to meet the light of heaven coming down, and it happens inside you. And that in itself is a powerful alchemical event. So there's that to share with you. And then, of course, if you bring Moldavite into the mix, you're accelerating and energizing all of that. The fourth cornerstone, just to get through these quickly, is this one, which is called phenakite or phenacite. You can pronounce it either way. And this is an extremely rare stone. It's related to emerald, but it isn't the same kind of mineral. And to say it in a nutshell, phenakite is the primary stone for third eye activation, crown chakra opening, visionary experience, and interdimensional travel. People who are working with crystals are familiar, most of them, with those terms, right, and what it even feels like to have your third eye activated. Right. So I use phenakite a lot for inner journeying and for bringing light into my upper chakras. So that's the reason why it's the most powerful one of all the things in the mineral kingdom for that purpose, in my view. So that's how it got to be the fourth cornerstone.
Four very powerful stones, very definitely for people to work with. And I want to ask you this here, because I think this is an appropriate time. Right now, especially where some people are so challenged financially and so on, and maybe they can't go out and get a piece of Moldavite and phenakite, the money isn't there. Isn't it true you can also work with, I mean, it's best to have the actual stone, but isn't it true you can also work with the photos of the stones and hook into that energy that way?
Absolutely. In fact, there's my usual mantra these days is, oh yeah, there's something about that in the book, no matter where I am or what anyone says. That's what I put into it. So yes, you can work with the photographs of the stones and receive the energy. In the Book of Stones, which is published about 15 years ago, many people have experienced that because we put really good color photos of each stone that I wrote about in that book. And I've done the same thing here too. And in part, it's to share the beauty of them, but it also very consciously was in order to help people connect with the energy of each stone or whatever stones were resonant with them. So that happened. And that makes me want to say to you, Krista, there's a whole chapter in the book about what I call photonic layouts. And this takes that step of using a photograph a little bit further. I think most crystal lovers would have heard of body layouts, where you lie down and someone places stones on your chakras in different parts of your body. And there's a kind of vibrational chord of harmonious energy that's produced for each specific purpose that the layouts are made for. The photonic layout uses much the same idea, except that instead of laying stones on someone's body, you have a photograph of that person lying down and you place the stones on the photograph. This is derived from radionics, which also uses photographs to energetically affect things. And I tried it out with stones in my 2016 Alchemy of Stones workshop. And everybody, we had 180 people there. We all did those photonic layouts where someone would lie down and their partner would do the body layout on their photograph, not on the person. And when we did that, 95% of the people could feel the stone energies in their bodies, even as they were just being put on their photographs. So to me, that's a revolutionary opening in terms of all the different things we might then do working with stone photographs that way.
Right, and you know, this leads me into my next question, which is about the impossible, because you talk about that in the book, about doing the impossible. And right now, for many people, a lot of things feel impossible. You know, we know they're not, but people feel that way. So can you talk a little bit more about if somebody has something in their life where they feel, well, it's just impossible, what can you say to them?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I'll give you the quote that I used from my dear friend, Danny Deerdorf. to whom I dedicated the book. And one of his favorite things to say was, if it's not impossible, it's not worth attempting. And I love that, the spirit of that comment. And it's very, very real. What makes our world seem so hopeless in some ways, or so difficult, or, you know, it's like almost a feeling of imprisonment in terms of what we feel like our lives can be, that many people experience. It has a lot to do with the materialistic worldview that prevails in the world. And even spiritual people like us still have that underlying, because we're all brought up in it. And it wasn't something people did to us to be mean to us. It was what everybody thought the world was. Right. But what you and I both know is that many impossible things happen that transcend the materialistic worldview. When you hold a crystal and you feel its energy, if you feel that energy, you've just done something that is quote unquote impossible, because there's no measurement, there's no machine that can measure crystal energies, yet you just felt them. Right. And that's one of the things that takes people outside the bounds of that enclosure that we've all been brought up in. But it goes much further. The alchemists, and I'm very much in sympathy and in alignment with their idea, they believed that the highest purpose of their work was the redemption of the entire world. And they felt like they could work with Sophia, the soul of the world, to accomplish that. When they allied themselves with her, their efforts helped her. And that's one of the things that has really evolved in me, is the recognition that although stones do many things for us, our service to help the soul of the world achieve her aspiration of full awakening within matter, which was also the aspiration of the alchemists, is the impossible thing to commit ourselves to. But not only when we achieve that does the world completely transform in terms of how we experience it and how it experiences us, but also all along the way, our life is filled with the joy of carrying forward this aspiration. So the alchemists, you know, many of them never achieved what they were trying to do, but they were carried forward through living that life of the desire to redeem the world. And I feel like that's the big impossible thing that all of this work with stones is really aimed at, underlying everything else. Now, that's a big picture thing, but there are many so-called impossible things. And as an example, if you have one moment, I'll say, people do impossible things all the time. That's done through something that Joseph Chilton Pearce called unconflicted behavior. And what he meant by that is when a person commits themselves utterly with no doubt whatsoever, then things that seem impossible, that everyone believes are impossible, can happen. He has examples from his own life of when he had the feeling that he could do these transcendent things as a young man, he would show it to his friends. He would like take a lit cigarette and put it on his eyelid and say, "I'm not going to be burned." Boom, boom, boom. He did that, and he wasn't. He did other things that were more interesting and more productive, including he was able to, in the unconflicted state, if you can believe this, work all night at a check clearinghouse doing multiple arithmetic calculations while sleeping. And he had to sleep while he was doing his job because he was going to school during the day. So now anybody listening to this has got to say, now that's impossible. But he did that.
Right.
And even the simple thing of where you see a mother who sees her child underneath a car, and without thinking or doubting anything else, she goes up and lifts that automobile. Well, that's impossible. But we've all heard those stories. So, you know, part of what I'm trying to do in my book is to open up the worldview, give an alternative worldview in which impossible things can happen for us.
So it sounds like, you know, and I know you talk about this more in the book, and part of it is opening your mind to possibilities instead of impossibilities. You know, a lot of it does depend on your attitude. And again, something that you say in the book a lot are the three words: intention, attention, and imagination. So
that's right.
Those three things. And I think those three things really go to speak to impossible. Am I right? Or
well, Yeah, they do. They're the means by which we do the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I call those things the three powers of the human psyche. We've been taught that our imagination is unreal, but in fact, our imagination is our co-creative power.
Mm-hmm.
When we commit ourselves to what we imagine, that's when it becomes a power. And because we've been taught, again, through no fault of the ones who taught us, that imaginary things, that the things we imagine are, quote, only imaginary, they're not real, then we don't give ourselves to what we imagine with all of our being. And for unconflicted behavior to happen, that full commitment is essential. If you
Right.
have a doubt, it won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easier said than done, but it's something one can learn to do through how it feels. Intention is the energy of using your will, using that force of will to commit yourself. Attention is sustaining your attention on what you're doing, on your whatever the purpose is that you are working with through imagination and intention. So it can be for healing.
Mm-hmm.
People who commit themselves fully to heal can recover from deadly diseases. There are many stories about that.
Right.
I can tell you too that communicating with people who have passed over is one of those so-called impossible things
Mm-hmm.
that people who are able to put their imagination, their intention, and their attention on it can learn to do.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned to do that with my friend Danny.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a few examples for you.
Right. And there's some things about that in the book and some communication from Danny, which I think is really splendid. So the last thing I'm going to ask you about, because there's so much in the book, there's no way we can talk about it all. But you talk about the activity of blessing. And
Yes.
can you talk about that some more? Blessing to me is just such a wonderful word. And that whole thing that you talk about, the activity of blessing, is beautiful. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We know what blessing is. Blessing is from the heart, wishing well. And when I was getting ready to go speak at the Sophia conference that I mentioned earlier, I kept asking myself, because the title of the conference involved the phrase "a new consciousness." And I was asking myself, what is the new consciousness? What is the new consciousness we're evolving towards? And I went to sleep one night asking myself that question. And 3 times during the night, I was woken up, my voice in my head saying, the new consciousness is an activity of blessing. Mm. And finally, the 3rd time I wrote it down, and then they stopped waking me up. But what an activity of blessing means to me is, with every perception, this is the ideal thing, this is the idealization of it, with everything we perceive, you see something, you send your attention over to it, and you offer it your well-wishing, and you invite it into your heart. Again, this can be done with your breath, just like my working with stones is. You can, on your exhale, you can send your attention out to what you see. On your inhale, you can invite it into your heart. But the energetic, the purpose, the intention, what you use your imagination to hold is this well-wishing toward everything. Non-judgmental, you don't worry about what you're well-wishing towards deserves it or not. You don't worry about whether it's beautiful or not. And you try to do it with all perceptions. So everything you hear, everything you smell, everything you see, everything you taste, you send that blessing to it and you invite it into yourself with that feeling of love. And that, if we do it, is a completely new consciousness than the kind of consciousness in which we tend to live.
Right.
And very simple to do. You can take a walk and you can pick out things that you pass along your walk and bless them individually as you go. And it makes for a very nice walk.
Absolutely.
And what you notice after a while is that all that blessing that you are sending out is also reflected back inside you. Mm-hmm. And that's where the new consciousness comes in, because you enter a world in which everything is blessed. Mm-hmm. And that I want to share with you and say to the readers, just as my statement about things, that is our world. Mm-hmm. We do live in basically what I would call heaven on earth. Mm-hmm. We just don't open, haven't learned how to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the pieces of the book and the activity of blessing are teaching us not only how to see it, but how to enhance it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the co-creation part.
Right. That's beautiful. And, I like to just think if, even half of the people, would do this, how differently it would change the whole consciousness of the planet, and that's part
It
of
would
what
be,
we're doing. Yeah. It would be so wonderful. Yeah.
I had a few days ago, Krista, an experience of doing that out in the vegetable garden. And then I don't know what happened, but suddenly everything I looked at was utterly saturated with beauty and spiritual presence.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I entered reality.
Right.
I had left the unreality of the sort of materialistic habitual consciousness that prevails in the world, and entered into what the alchemists called true imagination, which means you're using your creative power to bring forth what's actually true.
Right. Beautiful. That's beautiful. So people who want to know more about you, your website is heavenandearthjewelry.com, right?
Yes. Heavenandearthjewelry.com. Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us more. Like, are you doing online classes? I know you have the website. Is there a mailing list? Just kind of tell people more about how they can learn more about you and connect.
Right. The way to send us an email, send me an email, or send to my company to ask for a catalog, for example, is to send an email to heaven and earth, all as one word, at earthlink.net. And that's all kinds of correspondence, which should go that way. I currently, because of COVID, haven't got any workshops scheduled in the US. Living in New Zealand, and I do have some plans to do something here, probably in about March, and it will be Alchemy of Stones workshops. But I also am on YouTube. There's a Heaven Earth One is the YouTube channel, again spelled out as one word, Heaven Earth One. Or you can Google Robert Simmons, Alchemy of Stones, Robert Simmons, Moldavite, etc. And those videos will start showing up.
Cool. Awesome. So lots of ways to learn more, and get this book. It is a wonderful book. And even just the cover, when I first saw the cover, I just kind of stood there and stared at it. There's so much in the book, but visually there's so much here too. So thank you for writing it. And thank you. I just want to personally thank you over the years. All that I've gained from your work and from your website has been amazing. And I always I teach little crystal classes, and I send people to your book and website all the time. So thank you for being there, and thank you for your time today.
Well, it's the purpose of my life to do this work, and it brings me joy. 35 years down the line, I probably am more enthusiastic than I was when I started.
That's awesome. I am too. Thank you so much. And I wish you the best. I hope the book does well. And that's all I can say. Thank you.
Okay, Krista, I guess I would say, in case they wonder where to get it, they can, of course, order it from Heaven and Earth.
Right.
Most of the crystal shops can either get it or they might have it. And it is on Amazon as well.
It is? Okay, because I know a lot of people go there. So, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. Wonderful meeting you, and I wish you the very best.
Well, thanks for the blessing. I'm sending one back to you.
Thank you.